So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who will be talking on using AI in fieldwork, staff awareness, experiences and challenges. And our speaker is Dr. Lesley Batty, who's a reader in ecological education at the University of Birmingham. Lesley's an educational innovator and developer and has particular interests in fieldwork, employability and inclusivity, with several papers in these areas and a forthcoming book, which we've seen earlier today, which is on fieldwork teaching in geese. Lesley is currently exploring the potential impacts, both positive and negative, of AI on employability skills and fieldwork teaching. So I'll hand over to you, Lesley, now. Thank you.
Okay, so yes, I'm going to report on a small study that I did last year. So as these things are rather rapidly moving, I sort of think we would bear that in mind that this was last summer that I collected this data. But I am still open to collecting more data. So if anybody is interested in contributing and who hasn't already contributed, I've put the link there to the survey. So what I wanted to do was to kind of explore how AI was being used in fieldwork. And I kept it very open in terms of the questions I asked and really talked about AI generally rather than specifically generative AI, because I think when I put this together, I was thinking Gen AI was still very new, and I think there was probably not enough people using it to kind of really get the sense of that. So I wanted to keep it quite open. So it was aimed at staff, and it was thinking about, what they thought about it, what their awareness of it, their experiences, and some of the challenges that we are thinking of facing. And a lot of the things that are going to come out in this presentation are things that have been picked up on already, actually, by a number of people in the previous sessions. The image there is absolutely nothing to do with anything. It's just a mining piece of mining equipment, and my core research is in mining, so I always try and shoehorn a picture in wherever I can. Okay, so let's get down to the details. So when I was putting this together, I was just sort of thinking about the background to AI and machine learning, and of course, as we kind of know, and from some of the earlier presentations, it's nothing new. We've been looking at AI and talking about AI. First mentions were actually back in the kind of origins were back in the 1960s, and there was always, this kind of idea that AI was going to kind of replace human beings, and obviously it was kind of focused on the kind of robot idea, and we've come a long way since then. But it's still this idea that we can kind of replace humans, or augment life with AI in some way. And of course, that's developed over time. So we had sort of neural networks coming in the sort of 90s, 2000s. And then, of course, that has developed into the kind of generative AI that we are kind of talking about today. When we're thinking about fieldwork, we can kind of look at how sort of digital has been used in the field rather than AI specifically. When we were doing some research for the book, we kind of found that the first sort of recorded use in the literature of using computers in the field was sort of back in the 1980s. Now, obviously, this has kind of moved on a lot, particularly sort of since the 2000s when mobile technology was kind of introduced. So we were able much more easily to take technology into the field and to use it in different ways. But now we're sort of thinking about actually how is the AI and the generative AI kind of transforming that. So what I did was I did a traditional sort of survey approach. So I used a JISC survey, and sent that out via sort of various existing education networks that I was a member of, or knew people who were responsible for. And I asked some basic questions about their demographics. So what's their job role, how long they've been in teaching, and then a series of closed and open questions to establish sort of what their experiences were with AI in fieldwork, and also a question about AI more broadly in education, and sort of some of their ideas and thoughts around the use of that. Given it was last summer, I actually had more responses than I was hoping for, so 35 responses, and hopefully we'll get some more today. So why did I choose fieldwork specifically? Well, it is a core pedagogy for geography, earth and environmental scientists, so it's something that we integrate into our programs. And so when we're talking about the use of AI, we do really need to think about how our students can use it, and how we can embed it in terms of thinking about their future employment. It's also fieldwork is also important for many other subjects, because it's not just about standing in a field as I'm doing here, but it's also about teaching that occurs outside the classroom. So whether that's visiting museums or going into the centre of a city, it can be anything really. So fieldwork encompasses a broad range of things. Most discussions so far, and I think that's still the case actually, have been around assessment and AI, and that's come out in this morning's session and the chat, I think. And yes, we want to basically be preparing our students for future careers. And we know that a number of our organisations that our students will go into are using generative AI for report writing and other things. So we need to make sure that our students are work ready and have those skills. So just some reports on what came out of this. So basically, our demographics was, as you might expect, mostly Gs, because those are our networks. But I did have a number from some other areas, and I did actually get somebody from sort of nursing, which was actually, they made some quite sensible, important comments. There was a range of staff. Actually, most staff had been teaching for more than 20 years, but we had a range right from newly teaching people right through to the old lags like me. There were 97% were academic staff, and about 3% were research associates or postdocs. So the first question that I kind of asked was, what is AI? And I think I made a word cloud, and the word cloud really illustrates just the diversity of responses that I got. There was no kind of consistent definition. There was no consistent use of terminology. It was all over the place. And I think that really does reflect our current understanding of what AI is. The complexity of it, the diversity of what it involves, is that we just don't have this kind of single definition that is useful for us to use as education people. So I have put one there from the OED, but it comes back to this idea that that AI can perform tasks that normally require human intelligence. And I'm going to leave you with that to consider. So for the use of AI in fieldwork, we had 19 responses were not aware of any AI use in fieldwork, and only 11% of the 35 had actually used it themselves. Most people were not particularly aware of any of AI use in fieldwork, but where they were, it was mostly to do with data analysis. So things like pattern recognition, processing of field sites, coding, transcription, and use for ID, particularly through things like leaf snap and those kind of things. There's a few other ones, so things like creating questionnaires, creating questions for use in surveys, and also sort of generative AI video for alternative future field sites, which was quite an interesting one. But most people had not really used it or weren't particularly aware of very wide use of AI in fieldwork. The use of AI in other teaching was very much focused, I think, in the comments around assessment again. So things like the stuff that we've already talked about, but also in sort of structuring reports, in sort of simulating data, particularly doing things like coding. People have used it for creating outlines for teaching, but again, it was very much around data collection and analysis. So there was lots of kind of really assessment focused or data focused use. In the open comments, there were some extremely negative comments about the use of AI. There were some positive comments, but not very many. So, for example, one respondent said that you know the important bit around developing solutions for things is for students to understand how to get from A to C. AI encourages students to do this, but without including the B bit. So not really thinking and not really learning anything. And the nursing respondent also pointed out that when in an emergency, nurses tend to be able to respond to situations appropriately and independently, not stopping to ask an AI, how do I respond to this? And although that might seem a bit left field with a nursing example, I teach things like emergency response to chemical incidents, and that's exactly the sort of thing that is the same. It's people need to be responding immediately without having to ask AI, and also doing a lot of the communication and the personal communication in those examples. And something that came out of those open comments was a real strong need to consider employability, whether that is specific technical skills and using AI or developing the softer skills, which AI is not as good at helping to develop, although we did see an example earlier in the chat. So the barriers, most of our respondents didn't feel particularly confident about using AI. 50% were sort of partially confident, and about a quarter were not confident at all. And that came out in this question. So the knowledge of AI was a real barrier. Time to develop and understand it, and unsure how to use it in the first place. There was definitely a mistrust and ethical considerations, including those sustainability issues that we've come up against already. There's also concerns about data privacy, but there was a kind of general acceptance that AI is here to stay and we have to embrace it somehow. So just to finish off, I think with the digital tools and thinking about this, it comes back to Derek's and Sonia's point earlier from the same model, the SAMR model. We need to think about how we're using AI and generative AI, and thinking about it as pedagogically driven rather than technology driven. So how are we using it and why are we using it? And another shameless plug for the book, in our book coming up, in the chapter on digital, we have suggested some ways in which AI can assist with the development of fieldwork, either through planning, through assistance in things like translation for students who may not have English as their first language and things like that, but also through analysis of data. And I've just put a couple of bit of reading there, which would be helpful. Oh, sorry, I should change that, but thank you to everybody.